Hi, I'm Bill Doherty, and I want to welcome the viewers to another edition of Bill's Bullpen. Bill's Bullpen is a program that's intended to give people an idea of what's going on in our region and some of the people that are involved in doing those kinds of things. Today I have with me Dan Sullivan. I think you're better known as Nurse, Dan?
Yes, nurse is not my first name, it is my profession. And I should just say this right off the bat, Bill. I have not been to bed in 29 hours. Like a lot of folks, I've had to take on a second job and work double shifts in order to make ends meet. And I know there's hundreds of thousands of folks just like me across the Commonwealth and millions across the country that have to work twice as hard to make a living. So if I seem a little sluggish, it's just that I'm a little sleep deprived, but nonetheless, I'm happy to see you.
Well, Dan, the reason why you're here is that you're one of the, how shall I say, optimistic folks that are running for public office, and you're running against an incumbent for the 9th Barnstable District, which happens to be my district. So I guess you're talking to me about why I should vote for you.
Well, I think the answer to that question is real simple, Bill. Are you satisfied with the status quo?
And I think that's a good question. So with that, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure.
Who are you?
Sure. Hey, I have lived in Plymouth for the past 22 years. I just got married 4 weeks ago.
Mazel tov.
Thank you very much. I have a wonderful son who just married his beautiful bride last September. He's a very successful engineer, and his wife is a very successful physician assistant. My background is that I was in corporate sales for 25 years. I sold to a variety of industries, from Fortune 500 companies right down to startups and all points in between. And what sales gave me as a good quality is I developed a knowledge base that's an inch deep, but it's a mile wide. So I have a basic understanding of a wide array of industries, of businesses, and needs and wants. During the Great Recession, under the Obama administration, I decided to do something more meaningful. So I went to nursing school nights and weekends, and I earned my nursing degree, and for the past 8 years, I've worked as a registered nurse. We call it in the industry, I'm a bedside nurse, which means I am at the patient's bedside. And I love it. I love the work because I love to advocate for my patients, and I also love to assess and come up with good clinical judgments so that I can help the patients achieve optimal health outcomes. I mentioned that I'm working 2 jobs, so I work in a community hospital.
Not Carney.
Well, I did work for Stewart, and that
oh boy,
you want to go into Stewart.
Yeah, we could talk about that.
We can talk about that because the story that's been portrayed in the media is not the whole story. It's actually much seedier than that. But my primary job now is I'm a corrections nurse. I work in one of the state's prisons.
Let's say they closed Cedar Junction, I think.
Yeah, I'm over at Bridgewater Correctional.
Okay,
so they have a cluster of prisons over there.
Yeah, I know them. Yeah.
And I toggle between 2 of the prisons.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, the main thing, there's a lot of stuff at Bridgewater that has to do with people coming in for assessments and evaluation. Are you part of that team?
Yes.
Okay.
So some of your most heinous offenders that you see in the media and the newspapers, they'll come to Bridgewater for an evaluation to determine if they're competent to stand trial. I don't immerse myself in the legal and the judicial aspect.
Yeah.
I just treat them as any other patient. Mm-hmm. And you know, what I do find, there is a common denominator between the patients I see in a traditional hospital and the patients that I see in a forensic psychiatric hospital. And that is that there is a lot of mental illness in our society, more than you can imagine. And also part of that mental illness is a lot of substance abuse. And so what I do, I'm not a miracle worker, I'm just one person, is I just listen, and when I listen, I learn. And it's amazing that somebody can come in and their behavior is off the rails, but if you just hear them out and you talk common sense with them, you can actually start to interact, and you could have a productive interaction. So I like it. It's difficult work. It ain't easy, but I enjoy it.
Okay, well, I know a lot about dual diagnosis. I was on the state board for National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, here in Massachusetts, and I know that the dual diagnosis has people who are self-medicating and basically, decompensate because of that. And I think that more attention does need to be paid to that, because a lot of the decompensation results in harm to self as well as being a danger to others. So that's part of the reason they always talk about stabilizing, before we go forward. Now, one of the things that you're up against is that you're running as a Republican in Massachusetts. Okay, now what in the 9th district, it used to be a Republican stronghold, especially Cape Cod. Cape Cod has been in a transition. And Massachusetts used to be a Republican state. As a matter of fact, the foundation of the Republican Party actually started in Massachusetts when it changed from the Whigs to the Republicans. So there's a long history, although it's been, it's been superseded, as we've gone forward to become a Democratic stronghold. And it was the only, I think it was the only state that voted for McGovern.
McGovern in 72.
In 72. So, but before that time, there were Republicans like Frank Sargent, like Leverett Saltonstall, and people that that looked at the people and looked at their responsibility to serve the people. So, let's talk a little bit about how you plan to serve the people in Massachusetts.
Well, you mentioned Republican. I mean, a lot of people think that running as a Republican in this state is a fool's errand. And I've kind of moved beyond the partisan politics. To me, it's not about left versus right. It's not about red versus blue. To me, it's about right from wrong. And I believe that our government has pursued wrong policies.
Like what?
Well, first of all, taking in millions of migrants illegally when we take in millions of immigrants legally. So I work in healthcare. I work with many immigrants who came to this country legally. They played by the rules, okay? And they tell a story of pride that they came to this country, they educated themselves, they never took public assistance, and they went out and they built careers for themselves, they built families for themselves, they're homeowners, they're taxpayers. Ironically, the immigrants that I work with are very dissatisfied with the influx of illegal migrants because they play by the rules and these people are not playing by the rules, okay? So that's the first thing. I think another thing is the gross federal government overspending, okay? I read the statistics. So we first introduced paper money as currency in this country in 1861 to finance the Civil War. Of all the paper money ever put into circulation, 40% of the paper money has been printed just in the last 12 months. And then we scratch our heads and say, geez, how did we get high inflation? How did we get high interest rates? How did we get high cost of living? Do you know, Bill, in this state, the price of a home has doubled in the last 3.5 years? It's unsustainable. It's nonsensical. It's not going to last. It's going to collapse. And so I look at this and I say, we have sort of, we're more interested in sound bites than we are in sound policy. And we seem like we're more interested in crisis, in craziness, in chaos than we are in just candor and common sense and compromise. Look, as a nurse, I work as part of a team, right? It isn't my way or the highway. It isn't, I need to be right all the time. You work as a team. You have a physician on your team. You have a social worker on your team. You have a caseworker on your team. You have a nurse's aide on your team. And collectively, you treat every patient to the best of your capabilities. And today it isn't that way. Politics has become war. And everybody loses except for the ones that are in the career politics. They're the only ones that win.
Well, I have a thing about career politics because I have a sincere doubt that career politics should not be a career. Politics should, in my opinion, politics should be where you put in your time and then you go home. In other words, you serve for a reasonable period of time and then you turn it over to the next, say to the next person. You throw the rope over your shoulder.
Sure.
Yeah. So.
I believe it's an avocation. It's not a career, and it's certainly not a birthright. So to that point, I certainly support term limits, and I also think that there's a credible case to be made for mandatory retirement ages based on the office that you're holding. This idea of having politicians who are in office for decades, and you see their wealth grow exponentially over that period of time, presumably through insider trading, when you look at their base salaries and how much wealth they accrued during that period of time. So I think it's a big problem, and my goal is really to go in and do the greatest good for the greatest number of people, and once I think that I've done all I can do, then go back to practicing as a nurse. Okay,
well, what are some of the ways that you're going to accomplish that?
Boy, that's a big question.
And it's a question you should be able to answer.
Right. So I think what you do is you start out with the easiest issues to deal with first. A lot of times people want to, or what's that saying? How do you eat an elephant? Eat it one bite at a time, right? So you look at the big problems and you say, hey, how are we going to fix it? The first thing I would do in Congress is I would turn off the printing presses. Stop printing money, okay? Once we stop printing money, okay, inflation should go down, interest rates should reflect the lower inflation, and that also should manifest itself in lower costs of living. I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is closing the border, doing a full audit on exactly who is in our country. Our federal government has been very clear. It does not know who it's let in the country. I just saw a report in the major newspapers that there is hundreds of thousands of unaccompanied minors that came into this country that they've lost track of. We don't know where they are. We don't even know if they're alive, right? So I think closing the border, doing a full audit of all our immigrants and migrants, seeing who's here, seeing who probably shouldn't be here, right? So I think that would be the second step. And then I think the third step is really, there's a lot of talk. Everybody talks about building or rebuilding the middle class. Bill, I think the middle class is dead. I was supposed to be part of that middle class. I'm not middle class. I work 2 jobs. I make a decent income working 2 jobs as a nurse. But I'm essentially living paycheck by paycheck, like millions of Americans. And so to me, rebuilding the middle class means doing very specific things to actually help the middle class.
Like what?
Well, I don't think that a $25,000 tax credit to buy a house is really going to help the middle class at all. I think that $25,000 is going to be added to the price of the home, and you're just going to pay more.
Can I write that down? That sounds like new information.
You know, I mean, I think there's small things you can do. I think that you could. Let's take a look at the biggest expenses for middle class: education and healthcare. Right? Higher education has outpaced the rate of inflation twofold for the last 40 years. That's insane. So as a congressman, you have the power of the purse. So you could use the heavy hand of the government to have colleges and universities make college education more affordable for working and middle class students. You have the wealthy kids, they can afford the full freight. You have all of the international students, they can afford the full freight. But I think with the advent of hybrid learning and online learning, I think every college and university can introduce a very affordable 4-year baccalaureate program targeted for working and middle class. The second thing is healthcare. And I know that the concept of single-payer health is very popular. Free is very popular. Put free in front of everything, people are going to say, yep, sign me up, right? Obamacare, which is known as the Affordable Care Act, was intended to make health care more affordable. I believe that became law in 2008 to 2010. Well, what have we seen, Bill? Healthcare costs haven't gone down. They've gone through the roof. Why? Because in order to launch Obamacare, the federal government had to take care of big pharma. They had to take care of big insurance, right? And then they needed buy-in. They needed buy-in from providers, hospitals, and physicians. And this is ironic because in this state, Steward Healthcare was conceived as a provider of Obamacare. So when the CEO, Ralph D. Latour, decided to buy Steward, his promise was to make it the safety net hospital for all Obamacare, or what we call here in Massachusetts, mass health patients. And even today, with all of the financial disarray of Steward, collectively the 6 Steward hospitals still provide more mass health services than all the other hospital conglomerates combined, whether it's Mass General Brigham's, BID Lahey, UMass Memorial out in Worcester, or Bay State Medical in Springfield, right? So I think if we are to lower the costs of education, healthcare, and then the other component of healthcare is prescription medicines. So part of Obamacare, there was this sort of cottage industry that emerged called pharmacy benefit managers. And it sounded really good on paper. They were going to be the middlemen. They were going to negotiate between big pharma and big insurance to lower prescription drug medicines. Well, if you look at today, the 3 largest pharmacy benefit managers, whether it's Caremark for CVS or it's Optum for United Health, their profits are through the roof. So again, instead of lowering the cost of prescription medicines, they've gone up. And among healthcare workers like me, we refer to Obamacare as no pockets left behind. Everybody gets something, and we, the consumer, the patients, we end up getting stuck and have to pay for the bill. And so I think if we target those 3 areas, I think that's a start. I think that's a beginning. And Bill, I'll say this, and I'll say this to your audience out there, I don't have all the answers, okay? But one thing I do know is where to go and find those answers. And that's what I would do. I'm humble enough to understand that there is so much more I don't know than I do know. But as long as
the beginning of wisdom.
Right, right. With the gray hairs, of course. So I know where to go to get the answers, and the answers are out there if you just listen.
Okay, now let's talk about how do you create the political will to get the support that you need to let's say, to get this stuff done?
Bill, that's a big challenge. You started off by saying I'm running as a Republican, and it's, you know, the R is almost like a scarlet letter.
Yes, I know.
And, you know, when we look at the political landscape, today the Democrat Party controls 87% of all elective offices. Mm-hmm. They control about 98% of the state bureaucracy. They control all 9 congressional seats and both Senate seats. In fact, this election cycle, 7 out of the 9 incumbent Democrats are running unopposed. And my question is one-party rule, is that good for a healthy democracy? I don't think so. And so that's one of the reasons I'm running, is I think people deserve a choice. And obviously, I don't have the financial backing that Keaton has. I don't have the brand recognition that Keaton has. I don't have the organization that Keaton has. I concede all of that. I just think that when we have competitive elections, the voter wins. When the voter has choice, the voter wins. If the voter chooses status quo, they want more of the same, which means Bill Keaton, God bless them. But if they sit there and say, you know what, I was better off 4 years ago than I am now, and I don't want more of the same, then they have a choice. And let me tell you, I'm the first person, if I feel like I'm not up for the task, I'm not going to stick around. I'm not going to stick around. It's not my seat. It's certainly not Bill Keaton's seat. It's the people's seat.
Well, Bill Keating's predecessor, Bill Delahunt,
Oh, yeah.
did a lot for Cape Cod. And at the time, I really appreciated it because he installed the expansion of the Regional Transportation Authority. He invested in the national, let's say, the national parks that are here on the Cape. His chief of staff is now a selectman in Yarmouth. And when Keating came in, he doesn't seem to put that same emphasis on, let's say, on the Cape, although he does have a place in Monument Beach, you know, here in Bourne.
Right.
Okay, and I do see him at Mass when he's running for re-election, you know, at St. John. So, but the point is that, you know, we have a situation here where we have an incumbent, okay, and that incumbent doesn't appear to be more interested in what's going on locally as he is in creating a brand in what I'd call some of his world travels. Okay, so what is your opinion about the value of, let's say, of traveling to other countries before you take a look at what's going on in your backyard?
Oh boy, you must be reading my my pitch
well,
here.
I did read it.
No, this is a shortened one. So, if you look at the committees that Bill Keaton serves on, and you look at his international travels over the last 3.5 years, Bill Keaton seems like he wants to be a European Union parliamentary member more than he wants to be the representative of the 9th Congressional District.
Mm-hmm.
This is no secret. Bill Keaton voted for the war in Afghanistan. He voted for the war in Iraq. Some of his stock holdings are public information through Forbes magazine. War has really, it's been very beneficial for his stock portfolio, okay? And we've gone from those two wars to now we're funding 2 other wars. We're funding Ukraine, we're funding Gaza. There's no end in sight. And my concern, and I think it should be the concern of all the constituents of the 9th Congressional District, is does Bill Keaton want peace? I don't know. I'm not sure. I think that's an open question. If you look at his actions, if you look at his travels, he has spent, just in the last year, he's pranced all around Eastern Europe, drumming up support for the war in Ukraine. It's unmistakable. And then the federal government gives us, you know, a couple $100 million for one of the bridges, and he's doing a victory dance. That's not going to build. That's not even going to build the buttresses for the bridge.
By the way, on that victory dance, prior to him delivering that money and getting the photo op, I had a conversation with the head of the rec department down in Bourne, and at that point, Bill Keating had never shown up to talk to him. He sent his aide over there. So, you know, so that's where I get the impression about what is his personal investment in what's going on. Now, we're getting...
His personal investment is his stock portfolio. I don't believe that Bill Keaton is really invested in the people. I think he's invested in companies like Raytheon, that are defense contractors that are making a killing off of war and ultimately making a killing off of killing of people. So I don't think Bill, I don't think he's ever really had to answer. I think the fact that he's a Democrat and he's got the Democrat and he's got incumbent by his name, I think he's perfectly content just to stay in office every 2 years, show up, give a nice wave, get reelected, and go back to Washington, D.C. and do what he's been doing for the last 10 years.
Now, we're actually in the last 5 minutes of the program. So I want to give you an opportunity to sort of get to your pitch, and what are the high points that you want people to, to look at?
Sure. So I hope you don't mind. I brought my notes with me.
Sure.
So I'm Dan Sullivan. I'm the Republican nominee for the 9th Congressional District. Just for you folks, the 9th includes the South Shore, the South Coast, Cape Cod, and the islands. As I've said, I'm running as a Republican, and many people might find that to be a fool's errand. We talked about that in 1972, Massachusetts was the only state in the country that voted for the socialist George McGovern. We've talked about that today the Democrat Party has a stranglehold on our state government. And my question to you folks is whether or not one-party rule in this state is good for a healthy democracy. Are you, your children, and your grandchildren better off today than you were 4 years ago? Are you folks satisfied with the high inflation, the high interest rates, and the high cost of living? Are you satisfied that the home prices have doubled in the past 3.5 years? Are you satisfied that 1.2 million immigrants played by the rules and came to this country legally, while 355,000 migrants came here illegally? Are you satisfied that your town likely will impose a Prop 2.5 override to cover the costs of the mass migration, which is draining our school budgets and our local aid for first responders? Look, I'm not a professional politician. I don't want to be a career politician. In fact, I'm the anti-politician. I'm a registered nurse. I rely on my prudence and good judgment, okay? I advise all my patients everything in moderation, including moderation. I believe that moderation is essential to health and wellness in life, leisure, work, and politics. And today, there's no moderation in our politics and policies. It's my way or the highway. It's win at all costs. It's the ends justify the means. And my question to you folks is that how you want your democracy to work? I don't, right? I can promise you this, folks. Unlike Bill Keaton, who's voted for the disastrous Bidenomics, the failed Inflation Reduction Act, the fraudulent American Rescue Plan, and the Biden Build Back Better bust, I will never, ever be a rubber stamp for bad policies, bad laws, and bad actors. The question is, it's not about left or right, it's not about red or blue, it's about right from wrong. There's an old proverb that says, the mighty oak trees grow from an acorn. And I'm here because I want to be that acorn for change and progress. My name is Nurse Dan Sullivan, and I'm asking for your vote for U.S. Congress. Thank you, and Bill, thank you very much.
And thank you. And folks, thanks for watching, because I think you've now heard you've heard a differing voice with regard to representation here in the 9th District. It's important that you listen to both sides. It's important that you pay attention to what what Dan is trying to tell you, which is you have a choice, exercise that choice, and remember that we're all responsible for what choices we make, and we have to deal with the outcome. So it's up to you, as let's say as both a watcher of this program and a voter, to take a responsible vote and be informed both on the issues and on the candidates that are running, both the incumbent and Dan Sullivan. So thank you very much, Dan,
Bill,
for coming.
It was a pleasure meeting you. I appreciate it.
And thank you very much to the watchers to have participated. You've been watching Bill's Bullpen, a product of Born TV.